Greetings, people. It's a blessed Saturday morning where I am here. And today we are scheduled to talk to a South African in the heartland of South Africa itself, but we've been having some technical challenges with connecting on to the other side. And we are getting word that we may be able to reschedule the broadcast to the following day, as our guest may not be able to join us as planned. So apologize for this mix up, and we can only hope that things will get better possibly tomorrow when we get back on track. So for today, unfortunately, uh, we'll just have a short conversation with myself. Yeah, so normally when you have a planned event, especially if it's a live event, it's possible that something may go wrong. And in this case, it's a matter of getting the our guest to be on the program, but it appears there's just some schedule conflict. Our guest was traveling heading to East London, but I think he may have been held up on the way. So we hope that tomorrow everything will be finalized and he will be able to join us. But I apologize for this. We hope that we'll get things going possibly tomorrow. So for today, uh, the conversation we were hoping to have was going to be focusing on the happenings in South Africa. So again, my apologies. We'll be able to continue the conversation tomorrow. So, but I just didn't want to cancel the program without saying anything. What has been happening in South Africa is something that I would say it has not been handled properly by the authorities, in that the countries usually have challenges, which is normal: high unemployment, crime, and politicians not living up to their promises. And it's normal for people to get frustrated. It's normal for people to feel left behind. But the issue that I think most African people have is that the manner in which this whole campaign has been handled poorly. There is a way in which things need to be handled in a professional manner, but I think for this one has been handled, unfortunately, not the correct way. Because when you look at I'll just talk briefly about the 10 points that African people outside of Africa are raising as in response to the happenings in South Africa. So if you can hear me, put something in the comment there so that at least I want to make sure the audio is good. Just want to make sure you can hear me, because I was having some technical challenges with the audio. Just post something to show that you can hear me. Yeah. So there are 10 points which we'll go over tomorrow when our guest is able to join us. But there are 10 points that African countries or Africans are mentioning. So, for instance, in the struggle for freedom for South Africa, it took the collective West, the collective South Africa, the collective African countries to. Okay, so somebody can hear me loud and clear. Actually, today I was gonna, let me put this one on. I was gonna bring out my South Africanness so that at least I can show. I will read the 10 points clad in my gear. All right. So, again, for those who are just joining us, we will be having our guest tomorrow. He has been held up in flight from traveling from, is heading to East London, but due to some unforeseeable challenges, he was unable to join. But he has communicated that he will be able to join tomorrow, Sunday. So, we'll be able to have this broadcast tomorrow. But I thought before we can just cancel everything else, I thought maybe it would be polite and right for me to share the 10 points that Africans across the globe and on the African continent are raising in response to the happenings in South Africa. As you may all be aware, South Africa is a country located in the southern tip of Africa, and it got its independence in 1994. And it took the collective African countries to help in the liberation of South Africa from the British rule. So most Africans are not happy with what they have seen on the ground. And the 10 points that our African people are raising is that African countries, especially the frontline states and other countries in the African continent, provided safe havens for the comrades who were in the struggle during the time. So, for instance, you have countries like Zambia, Tanzania, Mozambique, Angola, who were the frontline states. These are the countries who provided, and the others provided safe havens for the people who were fighting for freedom in South Africa. For instance, Thabo Mbeki, Oliver Tambo, and those people, Jacob Zuma, lived in Zambia. So during that time, so Zambians will say, hey, we helped you during the struggle. And that's point number one, providing a safe haven. And then the other point that most African people will say, military training and gear. We were helping the ANC. We were funding. We were doing everything possible to ensure that the ANC was trained. So you have nations like Algeria, Egypt, Ethiopia, Tanzania provided crucial military training to the ANC. And Nelson Mandela, who is obviously the icon for the South African movement, lived in, I think, for instance, Nelson Mandela received his early military training in Algeria and in Ethiopia in 1962. So people in those countries will say, but we helped you. And then number three, you see diplomatic boycotts. African countries boycotted the apartheid regime in South Africa at the time. So African nations used their collective voice at the United Nations and the OAU. At the time, it used to be called OAU, but now the name is African Union, to push for international isolation of the apartheid regime. And that worked. So people are saying, we did that for you. And then the other point that most Africans are pointing is that there was a lot of financial backing. The OAU Liberation Committee, there was a committee that was helping, established in 1963, based in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. They were providing financial backing to the freedom fighters in South Africa. And then item number three is issuing passports and travel documentation. A lot of African countries were issuing passports and travel documentation to the people who were in the struggle at the time. So because of apartheid, government stripped or denied passports to activists. So people were not allowed to get passports. So you find that countries like Tanzania, Zambia, Ghana issued diplomatic or national passport to South African dissidents, allowing them to travel to the world and other parts so that at least they could mobilize and be able to fortify themselves and fight in the struggle. And the other point is that education for exile and refugees. Nations across the African continent provided universities, schools to young South Africans who fled from South Africa. They were refugees from South Africa heading into Tanzania and a lot of other African countries. And the other point, number 7, that Africans are raising is that direct military intervention, the Battle of Caito, Angola, for instance, heavily supported the Cuban forces, engaged in direct conventional warfare against South African Defense Force. In Southern Africa, in Angola, Angola was literally bombed. So the climax of the Caito in 1987 to 1988 was something that, it's something that people are pointing out that, hey, we were in the heart of the matter, getting bombed, fighting. And then the other point Africans are mentioning is that transmitting liberation radio, we were transmitting, encouraging, because in South Africa at the time, there were radios, for instance, reggae music, the great Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, and the others. That is considered militant music. It was banned. So other countries were able to provide transmission of this liberation radio, for instance, to bypass strict censorship inside South Africa. Countries like Zambia, Madagascar, Tanzania, Angola allowed the ANC to broadcast radio freedom from their national transmitters. Most people may not know that in South Africa. So enduring economic and military retaliation, there were sanctions on other countries. Frontline states paid a massive price for their support for South African. You find that the collective West, the US and others, they were supporting the apartheid government. Let's not forget that. So we have to be mindful that it took the collective Africa to mobilize and support the liberation of South Africa. So, for instance, on the same economic front, you have Mozambique was destabilized. And the president at the time of Mozambique, Samora Machel, was eliminated. So you have countries like Botswana, Lesotho, Zimbabwe refused to stop harboring refugees because there were a lot of refugees coming from the other side into these countries. So the last point is offering high-level diplomatic mediation, assisting apartheid regime to crack down in the 1980s was one of the things that African leaders acted as viral intermediaries. Zambian president, for instance, Kenneth Kaunda, among others, hosted early secret talks between South African business leaders to see how they could put an end to this the apartheid. Now, fast forward 34 years later, in 1994, South Africa gets independence, and 30 years has passed, and you have young South Africans who don't even know what apartheid was, because people say, apartheid, what is that? So there is need for dialogue, there is need for proper education to be taught, and also at the same time, the rest of the African continent needs to understand that South Africa is going through a lot of hardships. We have seen the demonstrations, people calling for that the immigrants are taking our jobs, and we've seen that. The March, June 30th, a lot of non-South Africans left the country, fearing for their lives, fearing that they will be harmed, fearing that they will be, unalived. So South Africa has, in my opinion, has not handled this situation carefully, because it's true that South Africa got its independence because of the collective might of the entire African countries getting together to push for the freedom. I want to point out that during the liberation struggle, there was one country, for instance, Malawi. Malawi never stopped dealing with the apartheid government. Malawi kept working with the apartheid government So we want to point that out so that at least people get a clear perspective. Countries like Zambia were sanctioned. Some of us growing up in those days, we remember some of these days. Countries were isolated because they were pushing for the liberation of South Africa. Now, fast forward, it's a new time and season. There are new people in South Africa who don't even know what apartheid was, don't even have any idea of what the struggle was. So it's understandable for the younger people who are growing up because when you are hungry, when you don't have a job, you don't care about the liberation struggle. For instance, the ANC has now become very unpopular. Ramaphosa is unpopular in South Africa. So this is why you are seeing him not really saying anything much, because the ANC got into a partnership with the DA, the Democratic Alliance. So sometimes it's fair to say that the ANC tied their hands in their back. So this is why sometimes you can see that there isn't much push for curbing the violence. We've seen videos where people the police are in the midst of people looting, people causing confusion, and they're pretty much sitting back and watching. So these and many more questions will be asked when we have the the representative, not necessarily the representative, a representative of South Africa, not the government, to share his thoughts, because a lot of people want to know what is happening on the ground and why has the South African government failed to resolve the issues of unemployment, the challenges that the people are facing in South Africa. And it's very true. We must put it in proper context that legal migration is the goal for all countries. And countries need to ensure that at least they are documenting people who are in their country, and it's right for the South African government or for the South African people to call for people to be documented. But what is wrong is the manner in which this thing has been handled, because it paints South Africa in a negative light, and it causes people to hate on people in South Africa now, which is not the case. Because I saw a video where South Africans were in Mozambique and they were chased. So a few months ago, South Africa was the envy of most African people, where they took other countries to the ICC. But now South Africa is becoming shunned by other countries. Most South Africans I know were walking with their head raised up. But now, with the happenings in South Africa, most South Africans who are residing outside of South Africa, they feel embarrassed in a way. And I've asked a few people to come to share some thoughts, and they cannot do it. Because when you live in a foreign country, the stakes are different. When you are on the ground in South Africa, you can mobilize, you can march and call for the foreigners to be chased out. But when you are a South African in a foreign country, and when you yourself, you are a foreigner, it's a different case. Because chances are that you may also be one of those people who can be accused by others that you are taking the job of the other people. But we're not going to get into that. But we'll be able to continue this conversation tomorrow when we have our special guest. Again, I apologize. Our guest was having some challenges because he was traveling. And this is common when you are doing a live show. It's possible that everything is structured, but something happens and then the guest is not present. So we'll be able to continue the conversation tomorrow. I just thought maybe instead of just canceling the stream, I can showcase my gear And then I can say, Wena Wendlove. Those who know, know. Otherwise, ladies and gentlemen, we'll circle back tomorrow at the same time. And for now, enjoy the rest of your day. And kudos, we'll be seeing you tomorrow. It's bye for now. Wena Wendlove.